Another day, another new Volkswagen Group product with a 1-litre TSI petrol engine. That's right, we have already reviewed the new Polo, Rapid and the Vento at this very show, all of which feature Volkswagen's new 1-litre turbo petrol motor. So why do we have the Vento back with us again? Well, the last time out when we drove the Vento, it was the automatic variant. But this is the manual variant of the car. And this is the first time that a Vento TSI is getting a manual gearbox. So is it still the driver's car in the segment? Is it still the most exciting sedan that you can buy? Well, let's find out. There are a lot of things to talk about the new Vento, the rights and wrongs, but I'm going to cut straight to the chase and I'm going to talk about the engine performance, this new 1-litre TSI plus the manual gearbox. So how does it drive? Well, first of all, let's talk about the engine. So this is a downsized unit, as you might already know by now. So earlier the Vento used to come with 1.2 TSI, but this one is a 1-litre TSI. So essentially it's based on the same principles, a turbo motor with direct injection, but this is a lot more advanced. You see, this has an all new cylinder head, and it also comes with DOHC, that's a dual overhead camshaft, as opposed to the old car's SOHC setup. So all of that really shows, because this engine produces 5 more bhp, so the total power output is nearly 109 bhp. Torque is the same at 175 Newton meter, but this has a wider power band. So below 2000 RPM, this engine has a lot of lag. I mean, it's quite evident when you're driving this car in the city, especially in this car, because this is heavier than the Polo. So in traffic, when you're driving in second gear and the revs drop below 2000 RPM, you can feel it's quite sluggish at that. But once you cross 2000 RPM, well, this is where the true nature of this powertrain really comes along. I mean, that's where this starts singing and dancing. So from 2000 to 6500 RPM, which is where the red line is, it revs quite freely, it's very sprightly, and the engine performance is also very strong. So in terms of outright acceleration, I think this is definitely better than the old engine. Well, of course, the old one came with a lightning quick DSG gearbox. This has a manual transmission, but this car is lighter. It's nearly 30 kilograms lighter because it has lost one cylinder, and that really shows. It overall feels very light. And the gearbox in itself, this manual transmission, it has very slick throws and very short and slick throws. The clutch action is also very light. I mean, I can't say it's really the lightest in the segment because at low speeds in traffic, it does feel a little hard. But overall, when you're driving fast, it really plays along nicely. And another thing that I really like about this new engine as compared to the old 1.2 TSI, well, that engine above 5000 RPM, it used to, the performance used to taper off. But this one, this pulls strongly all the way up to its red line, that is 6500 RPM. So the top end of this engine, it's also really very strong, and it feels much better than the old car. The one thing that I really don't like about this engine is that it feels thrummy all the way. I mean, this is a 3-cylinder engine, so that refinement of the old 4-cylinder motor is of course gone. Of course, when you're on the move, when you're driving it enthusiastically, so you don't quite notice it, but in day-to-day driving, when you're in traffic or you're just driving normally, you can feel that engine, it's wheezing and it's quite thrummy. So that's the only thing that kind of bothers you. Of course, if you compare it with the City's 1.5-litre petrol engine, or even the Verna's 3-cylinder engine. Now, one thing where the Vento absolutely excels is the handling department. Now, starting with the steering, of course, it has a lot of feel. That's precisely because it has that heftiness, that typical German heftiness that we are so used to now. And at the same time, the nose, of course, it's lighter now because the engine, it has lost one cylinder, but the nose is still quite pointy, and it darts in the direction wherever you point it at. So in that sense, the whole setup, it's quite predictable, and you really quite enjoy it throwing around corners. Now, coming to the tires, this comes with 16-inch alloy wheels, and they come short with 195 section width tires. Along with that, the car has a wider track. So when you go around corners, of course, you get a lot more feedback. It's a lot more stable in that regard in terms of dynamics. This is really a driver's car. Now, one thing that's worth mentioning is that, of course, it's a great driver's car. But when you push it really hard, on the limit, this car tends to understeer. So we were recently driving the Polo at the racetrack, and that's where you feel that, of course, this chassis, inherently it's very good, but at the limit it does tend to understeer, and that's something if you're a keen driver you will probably notice. Now coming to the braking performance, of course again it's very good, and the brake pedal has a very progressive feel, and the braking performance in itself is quite impressive. But when you brake really hard, that is under emergency braking, the brakes do tend to be a little grabby, which was the case with the old car as well. So that's the only thing that you need to take care of, and that causes a little bit of discomfort when you're driving really fast and when you brake really hard, so you know that's something that you are expecting. So we have already discussed the cabin of the new Vento in detail. It's the same old place. I mean, there is not much that has changed. There's the same old car and it does feel a little dated. But I'll quickly tell you the things that I like and I don't like about this cabin. First, things I like, well, this touchscreen, it's a new addition, but I think it's quite crisp to use. So I really like it. And the overall quality, the build quality of this car is still one of the best in the segment, if not the best. The steering wheel is, again, it has that typical German feel. It feels like you're driving a big German car. So that feel, the touch and feel of all the components, especially the gear lever and the steering, is quite good. So you feel as in you are in a driver's car. Apart from that, all the things fall nicely in hand. So ergonomically also, this car is really good. And then because the main focus here is being the driver's car, I think I also love the analog dials in this car, because the analog tach, the analog speedo, it really gives you that old school kind of feel. So I really like that. Now coming to the things I'm not really fan of, well, I think the design, again, it's a little outdated and it feels like you are still in that 10-year-old Vento, apart from the touchscreen. Now the touchscreen, like I said, it's a crisp unit, but the problem is it feels like an aftermarket unit. That's because the USB port is right here in the touchscreen itself. So the wire keeps dangling all the time, and that is really an eyesore. Now, one of my biggest pet peeves in the Vento's cabin as well as the Polos is the placement of this armrest. Now it's all nice and comfy when you're driving, but if you have to shift gears, it comes in the way. Same goes for the handbrake as well. You see, it's kind of stuck underneath this armrest. Of course, the armrest is height adjustable, but it doesn't make any difference and it really annoys you all the time. Now again, this feels like an afterthought and it doesn't really work here. So I think the placement is a little weird. Now another thing that I really like about this cabin is that the seats are quite comfortable. Of course, you don't get ventilated seats like the Verna, but still it's quite comfortable, and when you're driving fast, I think it can do with a little more side support, but overall I think day-to-day driving it's quite comfortable. So we set out to find if the Vento is still the driver's car in the segment. Well, the short answer for that is a yes. Well, there was no question about its dynamics because it's still the same car, the same underpinnings, and it still drives and handles beautifully. The 1-liter engine, well, of course, the performance is right up there. It's not the most refined unit, but in terms of outright performance, well, this delivers all the goods. But as an all-round product, as an all-round mid-size sedan, I think it does feel a little outdated because this car has been around for over a decade. So in all the other departments, in terms of features, in terms of equipment, it's really not there. And it's not a cheap car to buy, it's really expensive. It's right up there with the City as well as the Verna. So I've got two questions to answer. Would I buy this? Well, yes. If engine performance and handling is my priority, well, of course, the Vento, there's nothing on the market that drives like this, apart from probably the Skoda Rapid, which is, again, that's an identical car based on the same platform. So apart from that, I think there's nothing on the market that rides and handles as beautifully as the Vento. But if you think about everything else, well, I think rivals like the City as well as the Verna, they've got edge over this because they are newer cars. They feel more efficient, they are better equipped, there are more features, and especially the City in terms of space also, it has taken the game forward. And the City's 1.5-liter petrol engine, I think that is still my choice if I just prefer the engine gearbox combo. But as an overall package, as a driver's car, I still think the Vento is probably the only car in the segment that ticks all the boxes.